Many of you, if you're watching the news right now, you're seeing your feeds flooded with news that the Bank of Canada has increased its benchmark rate by a full percentage point. Now, some of you might listen to financial news and kind of let it gloss over you, but this decision today will have a big impact on your life. So I want to break down what this means for you and why the Bank of Canada is doing this, and why I don't think it is necessarily going to fix the cost of living crisis that's happening in Canada. So first of all, the Bank of Canada today, again, they raised their benchmark interest rates by a full percentage point. This one-time rate increase has not been done since the late 90s. So this is really unprecedented in a lot of ways in recent times. What that means for you is that because this rate has increased, you're going to be paying more if you go to a lender on things like your mortgage or on other lines of credit. Why is the Bank of Canada doing this? Why do they want you to pay more in interest on these things? Well, it's no surprise to any of you watching to know that it costs a lot more to buy things these days. Everything costs more. It costs a lot more. And many Canadians are having a hard time making ends meet. That's what is referred to, broadly speaking and oversimplified, as inflation, right? The cost of goods in Canada has massively, significantly increased over the last couple of years. And what the Bank of Canada did today is they're saying, look, we want to increase the cost of borrowing money. We want to make it more expensive for you to borrow money so that hopefully you will spend less, you will buy less things, there'll be less demand for things, and therefore the prices for those things will fall. So I want to now break down why inflation is happening in Canada, like why it's so big. Many of you guys have watched videos about me talking about this in the last couple of years, but you all know that over the last couple of years, the Trudeau Liberal government has had massive, incredible, unseen deficit spending. So there's been a lot of deficit spending, which has resulted in hundreds of billions of dollars kind of going out into the system in Canada. So what happens when there's more money in the Canadian system? Well, if there's more money in the system, what ends up happening is that money chases the same amount of goods that were there, and so prices increase, right? So Trudeau's deficit spending in a lot of ways has resulted in some pressure on inflation in Canada, or the increase of the cost of goods. So today, what the Bank of Canada is really saying is, we hope that by increasing interest rates and you Canadians paying more for things, that this is going to now decrease the pressures that was created by some of this economic policy that the Trudeau Liberal government has put in place. But it's not just that. So Trudeau needs to do a lot of things in order to address the problems that I think he has created over the last couple of years. So first of all, Trudeau can't just rely on you paying more in interest rates to solve these cost of living problems. First of all, he needs to get deficit spending under control. This is not going to get better if the Trudeau Liberal government keeps spending this way. I would hope that every Canadian agrees with me. This is not a sustainable situation. It's not in anybody's best interest. The second thing is, many of you are, I know so many of my friends, we've talked about potentially doing a little road trip here and there over the summer. It's just not in the cards for many Canadians because of the cost of fuel, right? And the cost of fuel doesn't just impact you filling up your car. It also impacts things like what? Like the cost of groceries, right? For example, because why? Well, we have to transport groceries to grocery stores and to you. High fuel costs have a huge impact on the entire economy. The Trudeau Liberal government has done what over the last 7 years? They've increased Canada's dependency on foreign carbon energy because they've eroded Canada's ability to produce energy. And for those of you who say, well, okay, what about the environment, Michelle? Well, if the Trudeau Liberal government was serious about making your life more affordable and decreasing carbon energy, there would be a lot more alternatives to high carbon products and practices. Like in my riding here in North Central Calgary, we don't even have any sort of mass public transit in spite of the fact that billions of dollars have been promised for it. So like what the Trudeau Liberal government has done is they, by their policy of eroding Canada's energy sector and increasing our dependency on foreign oil, now that there's a global supply issue because of some of the sanctions that have been put on Russia because of their invasion of Ukraine, all of a sudden we're vulnerable to a massive cost increase in things like fuel. So the Trudeau Liberal government needs to reverse that policy that has failed us, because that is also an inflationary pressure. The other thing is that many of you have noticed the price of food has really increased. A lot of economists are worried about the fact that food shortages might continue to increase, particularly in the fall, because of issues like global supply shortages caused by things like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, among others. So Trudeau, have you heard him talk about food shortages or any sort of plan to address, look at different policies in Canada that we could enact in the short term to address food prices? No, he hasn't talked about that at all. And that's an inflationary pressure as well, too, that the Liberal government needs to get on top of. And that leads me into a broader topic of the fact that we are, as a country, very reliant on other countries to provide us with goods and services, right? So when other countries like China, for example, which we're very dependent on for imports of basic goods, when they have supply issues, we have supply issues. So I was reading today that China might enact another wave of harsh lockdowns because of the BA.5 variant of COVID. If China locks down again, what does that mean for Canadian goods and services? What is the Liberal plan to make sure that we're not as reliant on other countries for providing us with basic goods and services over a longer period of time? Liberal government isn't talking about this at all. And it's a hugely important thing if we're looking at making sure that this inflationary pressure, this pressure that on our cost of living, doesn't affect us in the longer term. The other thing many of you write to my office about as a member of parliament is you can't afford a house. The Liberal government really hasn't done much more than juice demand on the housing market. They haven't addressed some of the pressures on supply and other policies and programs that might actually be leading to market speculation or whatever. But the Liberal government really needs to get serious on housing prices and supply as well, too, because that also affects your cost of living. And many of you that have gone out, if you've been lucky enough to go out for dinner or try to get a bite to eat somewhere, you'll notice that there's a lot of shortages of labor, right? Or those of you that work in the service industry, you know that there's a lot less people working. That's not just in the service sector. There's many labor shortages in areas like security screening in airports. You've seen that in the news too. Labor shortages, when there aren't enough people to do the job, that also has an impact on prices of the things that you're paying for, right? So how is the Liberal government addressing labor shortages that are creating inflationary pressures? I don't even think Justin Trudeau understands this concept, because he certainly hasn't been talking about it in any meaningful way. And what we can't see, what the Liberal governments need to prevent is a really bad situation from occurring in Canada, where we're seeing this increased cost of living or this increased inflation while the economy shrinks. Many economists around the world are worried about a recession happening over the next several quarters. If we're seeing the cost of goods increase while the economy shrinks, that's a big problem for you. It means that your life is going to become even more unaffordable, and the Liberal government needs to address all of these things. So what can we do about this? Raising awareness of these issues and saying that it is not acceptable for Justin Trudeau to expect you to pay more for interest to solve all of these problems, that's step number one, because I think, Canadians need to be made aware of this. So you can help me by sharing this video. I'm trying to do a bit of an explainer here so that people can talk about it. The second thing is we need to press for action. I often talk to you about the importance of parliamentary petitions. This isn't necessarily just a regular petition. It's a formal petition with the House of Commons that if you sign it, the Liberal government is required to respond to you after it's submitted in the House of Commons. I've got a link to that petition in the video description of this. It'll take you 2 minutes. It's about the cost of living and the need to have a bigger plan for affordability in Canada. If you sign that, the data doesn't go to me. But what it does is it requires Justin Trudeau to respond to you on these issues. So that's two things that we can do today to start raising awareness of this issue. Share this video, sign this petition, and also demand better of the Liberal government. like them saying like, oh yeah, this is just going to solve everything. I don't think it is. We've got some pretty big problems that the country is facing that are a result of Liberal policy. So share this video, sign this petition, and understand that Justin Trudeau can't be relying solely on you paying more in interest to solve these big economic problems, a lot of which he has a hand in creating. Working hard for you in Calgary. Have a great day.